Hello, everybody. Hopefully our
Hey,
audio is working all right. Adam here.
I'm Brady.
There we go. We're here to chat about Dire Alliance Horror Kickstarter. It's live right now on Kickstarter. The link for the Kickstarter is in the description of the video.
You were leaning off camera. There you go.
I was adjusting myself. It's chilly down here, so I'm trying to zip my sweatshirt up. We've had just people asking questions, stuff like that. So we thought we'd do a Q&A. You guys are free to stop by, ask any questions you want about Dire Alliance Horror or anything Blacklist related at all. We're always up to chatting about projects we're working on. We also had people asking about, Fantasy Series 1 miniatures, quality and stuff like that. We had a live stream that was kind of just showing off every sculpt. We had some issues with the camera focusing. I turned off autofocus, and we have the sculpts here. So if there's anything that you guys want to see, we'll randomly probably show off some sculpts we think are cool. Just give you an idea of the quality you can expect with Horror Series 1. And also, like I said, we're here to answer any questions you guys might have. So this could be a very short live stream if nobody has any questions for us, or we could, have tons of questions. We don't know. We're here for you guys. So
We'll probably have about 30 minutes, but we can, fluctuate as needed.
Yeah. So we have about 20 people here, which is good. I'm glad to see some people caught us here.
So we should probably talk about the latest news, I think, since the last time we checked in, which was this. I don't know if this is the last update, but we have the glob, the unstoppable glob. So
we had a Halloween gift for everybody who was back in the Kickstarter. You'll see it on the Kickstarter page. We have a huge glob miniature, and we do have a couple examples of what we mean when we say huge miniature.
These are huge miniatures compared to a miniature. So
sure.
I don't know if you could show those off.
Yeah, this is just an example. Let me do this other camera view here so you guys can see what's on my hands here. This is just one of our standard bandit sculpts from Fantasy Series 1. I'm trying to figure out the distance for focus. Yeah, about right there. So yeah, that's
minis are made to be broken.
And then
somebody said, "Don't break the minis."
This is the huge one. So she's pretty big. He could sit on her shoulder. He could pick her nose with his whole hand, I think.
No, we haven't, rendered out the glob, but obviously it'll be more probably like this.
We've rendered it out. We just haven't.
Right.
We don't have a physical sample, but it's definitely going to be on this. This is a 75 millimeter base. We've had people talking about not having a base, like making it hollow, so the glob miniatures can go in the glob. Totally open to that. We're going to do some quotes and see what that would cost or what that would look like. But it's definitely an option. We've definitely heard that request, and we're open to it. But yeah, that's that. The glob is free to is included in your pledge for anybody who backs the Horror Series 1 pledge, and the cards and tokens to use the glob as a leader in Dire Alliance is included in the Dire Alliance pledge.
So somebody asked here, I think is what they're asking. They said sculpts for new Horror Series faction would be great to see. I think they mean the Desecrated.
Oh, you mean
I think that's what that means, because we added on that add-on pack of the new.
Let me pull those out here while we're talking.
If that's not what you're asking, feel free to correct me. But I'm assuming you want to see the zombie, the ghoul, and the
ghost,
and the what's the other one? Skeleton
and the cultist.
And the cultist, yeah.
Actually, the skeleton I painted, so that's a painted sample I can show off there. Now you find the zombie. There's too many miniatures. There are so many miniatures in this.
Yeah, we've hit the kind of typical lull in the middle of a campaign, but we have some really cool stretch goals on Dire Alliance. I hope things pick back up, leading up toward the end. Obviously,
I think they will. I mean, people have been comparing this to Fantasy Series 1, and if you go back and look at Fantasy Series 1, it was a pretty slow Kickstarter.
Yeah.
It only picked up toward the very end. So,
which would be nice for this one, because there's a lot of things I want to unlock for personal use, but there's a lot of cool horror ground we can cover still.
It's the Banshee. So we need the skeleton, the zombie, the ghoul. We need the ghoul. There's the ghoul. All right, so this right here is the zombie miniature from Fantasy Series 1.
Love that sculpt.
Nice traditional zombie. Shambling forward. I think we should probably have some more variant sculpts in Fantasy Series 2. This is the skeleton, which I painted because I thought the skeleton looked really cool. But this is what the miniature would look like painted up. I think they painted up really nice. I was very impressed with the minimal amount of effort I had put in to make it look good. So, and I did do it very quickly, so it's not kind of like, it's not a display material. No, that's the Banshee. Oh. I got the ghost over here.
Where?
Right here.
Weird. Oh, I thought that was another duplicate zombie. Yeah, that's weird.
So that's the skeleton. And then we have the ghost. Now this one will be produced in translucent blue plastic, which we showed in the Fantasy Series 1 update. And you can also see a render of it on the graphic for the add-on.
Somebody asked here, will there be more add-ons in the Dire Alliance Kickstarter? We always, we don't like to just, explicitly say, no, we're not doing something. But just a reason so people understand why we don't have a lot of different optional add-ons. It's just because we have our eyes set for, we have some foresight with the product line, Dire Alliance, and there's intent to have other settings and other genres done. So we don't want to kind of cover too much ground in just horror, because a lot of that design space is reserved for other, sets of Dire Alliance. That's not to say we're not doing it, but that's the reason we're a little more.
We're also we're trying to streamline our Kickstarters more, because if you look at our old ones like Street Masters, there's just so many SKUs, and it really complicates production and shipping and
fulfillment.
Things. We just want to make things as quickly. We want to get things to you as quickly as possible, and so that kind of involves streamlining our Kickstarters sometimes. And we wanted this one to be a really quick playing game, like one of our smaller box games. It's kind of like an experiment for us. The whole miniatures game separate product type thing. So.
And to be more transparent too, we didn't have as much time leading up to this one to have all the logistics in place for a more complicated Kickstarter. We intended this to be more we could handle at the time, because we want to just get it through production, through fulfillment, and get into backers' hands. So that's the main goal, is to avoid having too many complications in that right now. But again, we always leave the door open to see how things pan out. But that's just kind of the philosophy behind it.
This right here is the cultist. This is the objective marker for the desecrated faction, and basically in battle mode, your factions are trying to protect their objectives. So these cultists are somehow important to these desecrated. Maybe that's why they,
or vice versa, or you're trying to capture your opponent's objectives. So the enemy might be trying to capture these cultists because they're doing something that's making these zombies come to life, or whatever it is. So.
Yeah. So that's the desecrated faction, and then these right here. Unfortunately, we don't have the colored sample, but these are the Ooze miniatures. If you go to the Fantasy Series 1 Kickstarter, I think it's the second most recent update, has some photos from the factory of the colored samples of these things, where they're translucent green, and they look really cool. And that's actually kind of what motivated us to want to do a big, huge one for the horror line. Honestly, I can easily see that big giant ooze being used in Lasting Tales, for example. Just have a big ooze battle or something in one of the scenarios. So that's something that I want to also remind people of, that while all of Fantasy Series 1 is intended to be used for a game that we're calling that's called Lasting Tales, we're hoping to offer in a Kickstarter next year. And it's going to be a flexible game system where anybody who's familiar with games like Frostgrave or Rangers of Shadow Deep, things like that, where it's a miniature skirmish game, you kind of use whatever miniatures you want to represent the characters and the monsters in the game. While the miniatures will definitely be designed specifically for the monsters in the game, you're free to use whatever miniatures you want. So a lot of the stuff you'll find in Horror Series 1 could easily be used in what Lasting Tales will be. Like the Reclaimed, for example, it could function as just another variant zombie sculpt very easily. So.
Yep. Got a couple questions here. You should ask Mike from One Stop Co-op Shop to do more playthrough. He runs through it in 20 minutes. He actually does a more kind of extended overview. It's like I think it's almost like 40 minutes long of like setup and just like explanation of all the rules. So he really goes into detail. He does those quicker playthroughs to kind of just show the game off, and that's actually the idea. The goal is to make the game play that quickly. So that's probably why it comes off that way. And honestly, we just didn't have all of the content prepped to have more, because we don't like to use prototype stuff where it's just like white paper, and we like to have all the art done, all the development done. So that's why we don't have all the content to show just yet. And then we had a question here. What is the story? Or I'm guessing story. This is what is the story of Dire Lines Horror, a group of monster hunters. So there's actually kind of two aspects to that, because Dire Alliance, the setting is this place called Gothen Rook, and it's this kind of typical Victorian Gothic, like, haunted area with a ruined castle and everything. All kinds of typical monsters show up there. So when you're playing battle mode, you're actually playing as the monsters, the leaders that are kind of like the traditional horror tropes. They're commanding these factions that are also these nefarious creatures and different denizens that might appear in horror stories. So that's kind of the story of battle mode. You're just fighting for kind of supremacy of this area. And then the raid mode is when, you take on the role of these heroes that are trying to rid the area of these monsters. So you kind of take on the role of a hero to fight off those leaders in an automated raid mode. So that's kind of like and the story is told through the scenario sheets. You'll see some story excerpts there and everything, but it's kept a little vague just to add to the modularity aspect, because we don't like to limit the content you get to the story. I like to have freedom of like playing whatever combinations you want to play and making your own stories that way.
Yeah, I mean, a good example of like the vision we saw for this Dire Lines product is something like Unmatched. It's a game like that where you go and you buy this pack that you can fight these two characters, but you can also mix and match with all these other different products to just increase variability. And we kind of want to take that a step further, where we have you have these two factions to play against, but you can mix and match with leaders, so you kind of mix and match in those. You can mix and match. There's all these different scenarios you play through. It's not just fighting each other. And then also, we wanted to have a whole new game mode where you're playing solo co-op. So we kind of wanted to push the variability available for just a skirmish game farther than we've seen before. So
yeah. And someone else asked any plans to have hero faction with the leader to play against horror factions. That kind of goes into what we don't want to get too much into adding. Like, I don't want to. I always hate the word bloat in a negative context, because the game content's not bloat. It's like stuff you can use. But at the same time, we have plans for that product line where we want to sock it in that mod, like Adam said, the unmatched model, where you have whatever the sci-fi set or the fantasy set, and we don't want to eat too much into that territory, because if we add in hero factions, it might take away from like how the fantasy Dire Lines might operate. So there's things we're kind of reserving in that regard. We don't want to add too much up front, but it also goes into the whole complication thing. We don't want to add too many complications to this Kickstarter. Kind of just keep it as streamlined as possible while keeping it exciting and getting backers what they want. So. And
while I mentioned before, it's kind of like not necessarily just an experiment, but it is kind of experimental for us doing this new product model where we have a game with the miniatures line that are compatible with each other. We also don't really know how popular these miniature lines are outside of fantasy. Fantasy is it's a good example for test market to see how people would respond to miniatures for any use for fantasy. But we all know fantasy is extremely popular, so it's hard to judge if the popularity is from the product or it's from the theme. So this Kickstarter is definitely something we're watching to see how successful it is, to know which direction we want to take Dire Alliance in the future. So. There was a question about the Count having...
Oh, yeah, I missed that one.
Different leader deck than the Countess. So there's no leader deck in the game. They're leader cards, because when you're playing your leader has a card that's associated with them that has their special abilities on it, but you're buying more copies of that card in the game. And the Count has the same ability as the Countess. It's basically just an alt sculpt of that, with alt art, and also opens up the door to having... both players can be able to fight each other with the Count and the Countess as their leaders. So
and another reason too is because the keyword mechanic in Dire Alliance, it makes it so mainly that card, the Countess leader card. It's there to make her feel like a vampire, like a vampire lord. And we want the Count to feel the same way. That's why they're mechanically the same, but it's just aesthetically different. And like Adam said, it also allows for you to play, one on one, both playing the Count and the Countess fighting each other, having a lover's spat or whatever it is. But that's the main goal behind it, because we want to make them feel like they're both vampire lords.
Any plans for campaign play, campaign mode? I don't think it fits for this kind of game.
Yeah, it'd be more of like like the way I would kind of envision this. And this is just like, I'm not speculating what we're doing, but if you look at games like Dice Throne, for example, where it's a one-on-one dice chucking game, they added this co-op story expansion where you can play through like a dungeon adventure cooperatively or solo, and have a different experience. That's what the Dire Alliance is geared to do, because it's a modular system, like a game that, like, if it were to do something like that, it would be its own product where you could grab your own Dire Alliance games and play that mode together. But it wouldn't fit in. We couldn't fit something of that scope in this small box, so we don't want to we don't want to blow that.
We'll just
load.
say it's not going to be. There won't be campaign in this Kickstarter.
Right. Yeah, it'd be reserved for something much grander than just as a afterthought or something.
How much of this of the success of Fantasy Series 1 was due to adding Alter Quest in the Kickstarter? Was it Alter Quest that brought Fantasy 1 to such a deal that people decided to back for the miniatures and then it snowballed? I personally don't think that it had as big of an impact as people might think. It did give it a little boost. It brought some people over that missed Alter Quest that wanted to hop in on it. But if you look at the chart of the backers and the progress of the Kickstarter, it was very steady and slow for most of the Kickstarter. And in the last few days, it just took off, and I think that had a lot to do with just people seeing the amount of stretch goals being unlocked for the value, because we did offer it at a low price. If you see the Fantasy Series 1 pledge in the Dire Alliance add-ons, it's almost double what it was in that Kickstarter, because it was just such a great deal. And I think that had a lot to do with the success at the end of Fantasy Series 1. That being said, there are a lot of backers in Fantasy Series 1 that we let know. We basically put in updates saying, hey, we're doing Horror Series 1, check it out. I'm not sure how many people are interested in the miniatures, or if they're kind of just waiting on their fantasy miniatures. It's hard to say, and honestly, we probably won't know until the last couple days of this Kickstarter what that will look like. So it's interesting. This Kickstarter has been our fastest funding Kickstarter yet.
Yeah, so anybody backing, you kind of made Blacklist history here, because you funded us day one, within the first 2 hours.
I think it was an hour and a half when we funded.
So that's already success. So this is all kind of obviously just gravy and everything, but we want to make sure backers are pleased and are excited about the campaign. But we're obviously thrilled. We can't thank you guys enough. It's just an awesome achievement.
I know as backers, it's probably less exciting when you're not unlocking stretch goals, and we definitely hit a wall after we funded, and we've been sitting around 230 for a while. But we have plenty more stretch goals left. Hopefully we get to show those to you, and we'll see how the next couple weeks play out. Is there Dire Alliance mask? Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah, get us that license. it's hard to get.
Are there any stories for raid mode, motivation for each hero, like in Street Masters?
Yeah, well, each hero will have a little narrative blurb on their reference card, and then every scenario has a little kind of a blurb about telling you what you're doing in that scenario, and then the leaders also will have little narrative blurbs here and there, so you'll be able to piece those together as you're building. Like I said, I wanted to emphasize the modular nature as opposed to saying, here, play through this narrative one time and you're done. So that's kind of why narrative for me is always a tricky thing. I love stories. I read a lot of books, but I don't like to inject a heavy amount of story into games, especially games we're creating, because I feel like that kind of limits what you can do with the content, because you have all these characters and factions and heroes and stuff like that, but I don't want to dictate who you play as, or or what you have to do in combination of those things. I'd rather just give you freedom, just make whatever stories you want to make.
Will there be a small card pack add-on so we can take some of the horror minis as lurkers in Alter Quest? That's definitely something we've heard people request. It's something. We always listen to backers. We'll just say that. It's not something we're putting our foot down and say no way. It's not something we intended. But if that's what people want, we definitely listen. So if that's what you, if I'm assuming you're asking that because that's something you want. So, are heroes only for raid mode, or will they be used in some way in battle mode? Right now, heroes are only used in raid mode right now. So, always pleased with every Sadler game. Thanks, Baz. We're glad to always have you back. And
Appreciate it.
I like the horror stretch goal minis more than the basic set. Go in this style. Oh, the horror. Okay, so the stretch goals. You like the stretch goal? Yeah, we kind of. This one was tricky because horror. We have lots of ideas for horror. Like people, there's all different kinds of horror that people like. There's modern horror. There's like Cthulhu horror, like Lovecraft horror. There's really gross horror. This we wanted to kind of keep it kind of like classic traditional horror, like kind of like your intro to horror.
Yeah, because
not gross and scary, but like
we definitely wanted to have like a kind of a planned out tiered structure of how the horror series be organized, because I think we talked about this initially where originally I was pushing very hard this time last year. I wanted to have a kind of like Resident Evil style horror campaign, and I wanted to have that kind of horror. But from a marketing standpoint, doing a miniatures line, starting there, I think was a lot trickier than just doing like the classic horror, and kind of going off of, we had the fantasy series, which is a very universally known and accepted, like people know fantasy. We try to aim for a similar thing with horror, but it's a little trickier. So it's, there's things people prefer over others, obviously, and we're trying to take that into account as we're planning going to go forward. But yeah, like Adam said, it was typically trying to go for the very iconic, like classic horror movies, Victorian horror. Some of it kind of looks more like dark fantasy. But
that's an important thing too. Is we wanted to give people that are fans of the fantasy series 1. They wanted series 2, like people have been asking for it right away. But we, obviously said we wanted to make sure that it delivered first, and you guys got to see the quality. But we still wanted to have the option where horror series 1 is all the miniatures were designed to specifically used in fantasy games. Like they all would work just perfectly fine in D&D games of D&D, or there's ghost type characters, there's vampires, there's zombie type characters. There are heroes and special characters, but those will function perfectly well as like NPCs in a fantasy game.
I think the trickiest part is I think people came in maybe with the same expectation of the fantasy variety, but fantasy is such a wide palette you can choose from. It's got such a sweeping variances, but I think fantasy or horror is a little more niche in a sense where
everybody has their own idea of what horror is.
And we wanted to keep it kind of consistent because this is for a game, so we didn't want to get too crazy with different time periods meshed together, and we want to keep it kind of feeling thematic. So because we do have plans for horror in the future, obviously horror series 2 I mentioned, I have plenty of ideas for that if we can get there, but this was geared more toward a foundation for horror from the classics.
Is there a picture of a glob render next to a large miniature render and a standard miniature? There is a picture on the Kickstarter page of the glob next to a standard miniature. It's down, I think it's right before the stretch goals, the miniature stretch goal box. That gives you a good idea of the size comparison. And again, I can, this right here, this is a huge miniature. This right here, in our mind, is a large miniature. So this is 75 millimeter base, 50 millimeter base, and then the standard miniatures are 25 millimeter base. So those are that's what the sizes mean to us. Standard, large, huge, and the glob is huge, a huge miniature. Are there plans for sun drop variant? What's that?
I wasn't sure what that meant.
Okay, I don't know what that means.
Trying to look at that meant.
I might be dense, but how about doing daily unlocks? We can't really commit or risk daily unlocks. We don't have a consistent estimate of reliable number of backers in our Kickstarters yet. We don't know what to expect, so we can't really financially commit to daily unlocks. We have to rely on the classic stretch goal. As things are unlocked, once we get to a level where we're consistently having the same number of backers every Kickstarter, then we can do things like bigger companies do with daily unlocks.
Yeah, that's the problem with a lot of the daily unlocks you see are by established companies who they have these numbers they hit consistently where they know they can plan for those and reliably.
Or they structure their content to trickle out.
Yeah, they pad the numbers a bit.
Which we don't think that way. It's something we can consider in the future where we would have less content in the initial offering that's slowly unlocked. But me personally, as a backer myself, that's not something I like. I like to just go to a Kickstarter page and see what's there, and then just back. And then I don't really check back every day. I know not every backer's like that, but we definitely want to cater to as many different kinds of backers as possible, and keep things as simple as possible. Now, if people vastly prefer daily unlocks, that's something we can explore in the future. But it's not the way we structured this Kickstarter. Can you tease some of the upcoming stretch goals? One of the updates did something about being lucky. That's a tease for the next one. But this batch of stretch goals right now we're working on, you can tell it's kind of like a nature, dark fae type theme. And then we have some more in another batch of stretch goals past that's more like nightmarish type stuff, which gets a little creepier. But yeah, we hope to be able to show it off soon.
Someone's mentioned something about people on BGG maps not being tied to, not being tiled like Undaunted for greater replayability. Any thoughts on this? I do have thoughts, but it might. I don't know. It might. I don't want to come across as dismissive, but I don't think. I personally don't feel like the tiles in Undaunted have anything to do with replayability. I mean,
I think all it has to do is set up time.
Yeah, it's. I mean, there's different like armor values or what the cover values on the terrain, but it's only structured based on the scenarios you're playing. The scenarios will dictate how you set it up. But when it comes down to it, all that matters is what your opponent is doing. Like, I mean, there's choices. There's very little difference in choices you make based on what cover you want to go to. I mean, it's there, but we can easily add that to the board through effects on scenario sheets, like scenarios putting tokens on the board that would affect line of sight or something, stuff like that. But I think the maps as they are, the line of sight variances, they provide a lot of replayability based on where positioning is. I mean, even if you're playing on the same map, like the positioning is always going to change, And
the backside has the elevation rules, which kind of hints at like us being able to do more with boards in the future. But this is something we talked about early on with David and Trevor, and they like the idea of a board for this quick setup, because this whole game was about quick setup. Get to the game, play a quick match, and then put it away, and go to the next game. So,
in all honesty, the tile aspect of Undaunted plays to its doing the historical narrative where they're historically depicting these areas, and it works better having a tiles because you have those scenarios you have to build for. We were aiming more for quick playing modularity. That's much more important to us than any slight nuance and replayability, because I don't even see that as being a factor personally, because I play Undaunted, I play Unmatched. Unmatched uses the same boards. I play the same board almost every time I play Unmatched, and it always feels different with what the opponent's doing. So I just don't see that as a factor myself. So.
Oh, okay. When you're talking about Sundrop, you're talking about like a mini wash. That's definitely something that we could look into. I as a miniatures guy myself, I never liked those because if I like miniatures, I just paint them. But that's something we can look into for sure. We didn't plan on that for the miniatures. Blacklist miniatures products, they're kind of geared towards people who like miniatures and painting stuff like that. So I don't think it would make too much sense to have a wash on them. But again, we always listen. If that's something that's really highly demanded, we'll definitely consider it in future products. Especially when we have, like if we have a game that just has a few miniatures in it, we would definitely be interested in doing something to kind of premium, make them a little more premium.
I'm confused about this question. Board Game Hero asks, have you seen The Invisible Man from Unmatched? Yes, I have it right here because I love Unmatched. This is actually very similar to what Randolph is. Randolph has a cloak and a hood and a mask, and he has fingerless gloves, but you can't see his fingers. So it's actually very similar to this idea where we made it so he's wearing clothes. You can see his clothes, but you can't see him. Yeah. That was the idea behind.
That was the intent.
Randolph. Yeah. So I don't know if we can show that off better on the imagery or whatever, but that was what that was. That's why we structured it that way. So.
Yeah, one thing we want people to keep in mind for Dire Alliance when they look at it as a game, the real intent for it is to be a game you can get on the table quickly, throw together a faction, and then play out a battle with your friend, or team up and fight off a villain with very little setup, overhead. It's like our goal was to have a quick playing game, and that's definitely what we achieved. I think with Dire Lines, and I'm hopefully it funded fast. Hopefully it gets even more successful toward the end because we'd love to do more with it in the future. And again, every time we do more products for it, it just increases the variability and the options as you can mix and match the game with new products. So
I need to go buy the Buffy one. I forgot.
oh, for Unmatched.
Yeah, I forgot the Buffy one was out.
Oh, the ink wash was an option. Yeah, that's something too that like we'd have to plan that ahead of time because we've avoided adding new options in a Kickstarter after it's launched because it does complicate fulfillment and production. We want to keep things as simple as possible. But if that is something that the ink wash is something that's definitely heavily requested, we'll absolutely consider it and look into that in the future. I think we looked into that. I think we were going to look into that before, but I forget which product, but maybe it's something we haven't talked about yet. Any chance to make more neoprene board mats for Ultra Quest? If you mean print more of what we've already offered, we'll see when it sells out. We're going to offer those on our web store for sale after fulfillment is done, which I heard on, I think it was Games Quest, tweeting out saying that they were moving on to Ultra Quest this week, so that's exciting. But yeah, we'll have more information on that after fulfillment's done, and we'll see what our inventory looks like, and what the future of Ultra Quest looks like. Yeah, there is. Randolph does have a mask. He's got a hood and a mask, so he is mostly covered up, but it's like an empty hood, so it's like floating clothes. Any plans for another dungeon crawler that is not MDS, or is that genre done for you? I don't.
We've had a lot of discussions about that because it feels tricky to do one.
Honestly, there was discussion when we were talking about doing Lasting Tales. There was a discussion about doing just a very stripped down fantasy dungeon crawl using those miniatures, but we was like that doesn't make sense because we have Ultra Quest, so it's not out of the question. But we've also discussed doing something similar, maybe in different settings. For example, when we do Blacklist miniatures sci-fi, maybe we do like a sci-fi style dungeon crawl. But we're definitely interested in doing more games that are not MDS. We've done quite a few MDS games, and working on Dire Lines Horror has got us excited for doing other games, other types of games. But you'll always see little hints of our style, I think, in the way we design games. So,
dual-sided neoprene for Dire Lance Horror. I don't think that's very feasible with this campaign.
The appeal of neoprene is it has the grip on the bottom, so it stays on your table, doesn't slide around. So having double-sided neoprene, I know for myself, I would never get that I would never buy that as a product. But we it's not out of the question to do neoprene mats. But again, trying to keep things simple. We're listening to backers. We haven't seen a big demand for neoprene mats for this one. But if there is a big demand, we'll definitely take note.
Someone asked what was the story behind the hag minion. Yes, hag
I'll
does mean
leave that to Brady.
Yeah, hag does mean a witch, and it's usually used disparagingly against a woman, which is why exactly I thought it'd be much better to present it as a very beautiful but deadly man, effeminate man. The genders, it's more or less ambiguous, obviously, because it's more of a creepy magical being. But I found that to be, because we have the withered is kind of the typical what people would see as like an old crone, a witch. But I just think that using the term hag, I think it's more interesting. I thought it was more interesting using it that way personally, and I have just personal preferences, but that's where my creativity comes from. So yeah, it was just a personal choice. It's nothing really. There's no like deeper like reference there or anything like that. It's not like based on anything. It was more just I thought it was cool.
Yeah, Brady likes to mix things up a little bit and turn things on its head. I think that also like I said, we wanted to make miniatures that made sense for horror, like were interesting horror characters, but also made sense for Dark Fantasy, and I think that miniature alone would work really well as like an NPC in a you know, like some kind of charming, sinister guy in some fantasy game.
And it was kind of meant to like also represent like an evil version of like Prince Charming or something, you know, because it has like the flower there, and it kind of like has that creepy fairy tale aspect to it. So,
what is Mitch's next game after Buddy Cop? We did tease Boruto, which Mitch is designing, has designed. We're working on that one. We don't have a lot to say about it yet, other than it's a cool game. Mitch makes cool games. We're excited to show more about that in the future. So that is Mitch's next game, and he has more in the pipe.
coming from Germany, I'm not into it, but has the election impact on Blacklist? No, the election won't impact Blacklist except for just, you know, making everybody nervous.
Stress levels.
With how's Our Need coming along? Hope there's new stuff. Our Need's production's coming along great. Everything's looking awesome. We just did all the checks on all the cards and printed materials and everything, so it's looking good. There are only a few minor changes, so things should be moving along pretty smoothly. I hope there's new stuff to come, but it all kind of depends on how it's received. We would
love to do more Our Need stuff. We're gonna do playthroughs and stuff, and when we get our final copies of the game, we'll do a live stream playthroughs and chat about it. That is a game we're both excited about. We're a little sad that it didn't do better on Kickstarter, but we understand why. Hopefully, when people get it, they might spread the word and kind of get people more interested in the product.
Yeah, it should speak a lot about the game that I'm ecstatic enough that it gets to be made. I mean, it wasn't a runaway success like some of our other games, but the fact that it's getting made has me ecstatic. So that should tell you a lot about the game itself. So other than board games, would you do a co-op game like Frostgrave or Rangers of Shadow Deep, but more your style? And then someone responded below, like Lasting Tales.
Yes, yes. Just to clarify, that is the goal of Lasting Tales. If you haven't heard, Lasting Tales is the game we teased during the Fantasy Series 1 Kickstarter, and that is something we're planning on having a Kickstarter for next year with Fantasy Series 2. The Kickstarter is going to be called Lasting Tales because that's the game. That's the name of the game. And anytime we do a line of miniatures, it's typically going to be in support of a game. So the Kickstarter will be Lasting Tales. And that's the kind of game it's going to be, as a co-op skirmish game.
So I have to kind of wrap up. I can go through these questions here, but I don't know if you wanted to keep going if I have to leave. But...
Well, how much do we have left here?
So we got 3 here. Have you considered having Rodney do a tutorial for Dire Alliance? Rodney is completely booked solid. We might do something in the future, but...
We are always interested in having Rodney do a video for us. I know that I saw his news video, and they've talked about Myth and Goal. They were interested in that one, so maybe I can try to get that one in with him. But Rodney's booked a lot, so it's hard to get in there unless you're early.
Street Masters app, we have some more stuff planning. Tim, our developer's always constantly working on that. So yeah, there's definitely new stuff coming for that. We just don't have anything to announce just yet. Did you guys get in touch with Isaac for Blacklist Miniatures Gloomhaven partnership? We talked to Isaac a lot, but he's already got stuff in the works. Sounds like so. Well, I mean, it's not like he's at a loss for partners because people love to get on Gloomhaven stuff. So.
Well, I don't know if I think he might be asking about the previous one we did. Did you guys touch with Isaac about Blacklist? We've worked with Isaac ever since he did his first Gloomhaven Kickstarter. We did a scenario for that, and then he did a. We always play test each other's games, and he helped out with Alter Quest. He did a little what was that, the Call of Lunaran expansion?
Yeah.
And then we did a snare for Frosthaven. So we guest design on each other's projects a lot. So he lives close by. He lives in our hometown, so we stay in contact with him frequently.
All right, I have to go pick up my daughter, so I don't know if you want to keep.
I'll hang out here in case you guys have any other questions. But Brady's got to head out.
Check in later.
Kid's schedule.
Thanks for checking out Dire Alliance Horror. Appreciate it.
I would suggest doing an update, giving a peek into your design decisions behind the stretch goals. Now that you've explained the hag, it got my interest. Yeah, we do like to explain things in updates. Scotty usually plans out the updates throughout the Kickstarter. Talking about the game, talking about miniatures, things like that. We're always in the comments, so people have questions. They're free to ask us. We usually respond in a timely manner in the Kickstarter comments. Plus, we like to do these too. So anybody who misses this, feel free to, we'll direct them to this because it'll be up on our YouTube page ready to watch for anybody who missed it. So, Frosthaven mini set, we've definitely considered that. Isaac has lots of offers for Gloomhaven stuff. So, we want to see more stretch goals unlocked too. Again, Fantasy Series 1 didn't really blow up until the last few days, so we'll see how the last few days of Dire Alliance does. If it doesn't blow up like Fantasy Series 1, there's probably lots of reasons for that, but we're always analyzing our Kickstarters and learning from them. But we're very happy with it funding so fast, and this being our fastest funding Kickstarter. It's been great. We're happy. I think I caught all the questions. So if I missed any questions, feel free to comment on the video. We'll try to check and respond. We're always watching the Kickstarter comments, so feel free to drop a comment, questions in the comments. We appreciate you guys back in. Thanks for checking out, stopping by and chatting with us. Hopefully we answered some of your questions. And if you want us to do another one of these maybe next week, we'll be happy to. Just let us know. Thanks again. See you guys on the Kickstarter page. Spread the word. Let's get some more stretch goals unlocked. See you guys, everybody.